Millionaire meets this 4-year-old beggar girl with his little sister's dead teddy bear. You won't believe what he discovered 2 minutes later. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The scorching sun of Bakersfield, California, beat down on the asphalt that afternoon in December when Richard Sterling slammed on the brakes of his Mercedes-Benz upon seeing something that nearly stopped his heart. There, sitting on the sidewalk, in front of a closed downtown store, a small girl was clutching a faded brown teddy bear that he would recognize anywhere in the world. The 42-year-old businessman felt his hands tremble on the steering wheel as he watched the scene. The little girl, who couldn't have been more than 6 years old, hugged the toy exactly as his sister Cindy used to do. The same bear, the same button eyes, one of them slightly crooked. Even the characteristic patch on the left arm was there. Richard parked the car haphazardly, ignoring the angry honk of another driver. His wobbly legs barely supported him as he walked towards the girl. A gray-haired woman with simple but clean clothes was sitting next to her on a plastic stool, selling candies and gum arranged in a cardboard box. "Grandma, I'm thirsty," the girl murmured, squeezing the bear against her chest. "Hold on, Lily. We'll be heading home soon," the woman replied, gently running her hand through her granddaughter's hair. Richard stopped a few feet away from them, unable to take his eyes off the teddy bear. That toy had been buried along with his most painful memories 25 years ago when Cindy passed away at the age of 7, a victim of what the doctors called a rare degenerative disease. "Excuse me," he approached, trying to control the tremor in his voice. "That teddy bear, where did you get it?" The woman, who he would later learn was named Doris, looked up with a mixture of suspicion and weariness. "It was found in the trash, near those old houses on Elm Street." Why? Richard felt his breath catch. Elm Street. His old house was there, the house where he grew up with Cindy, where he lived the best and worst moments of his life. "That bear, it belonged to my sister," he managed to say, his voice almost a whisper. Lily hugged the toy tighter, her dark eyes filling with fear. "Teddy's mine!" The name hit Richard like a punch in the gut. Teddy. That's what Cindy called. The bear. How could this child know? "Don't worry, little one. I didn't come to take your friend," he hurried to say, noticing the panic on the girl's face. "I was just surprised because, well, it's very similar to one I knew." Doris studied the well-dressed man in front of her with sharp eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface. "You're Richard Sterling, aren't you? The owner of the Sterling Vineyards?" He nodded, surprised. "You know me? Who doesn't know the wine king of the San Joaquin Valley?" she replied with a tired smile. "Besides, I've seen your picture in the newspapers a few times." Richard took a closer look at the woman. There was something in her way of speaking, in her posture, that didn't match her current situation. Her hands, though calloused, had delicate movements. Her eyes revealed a sharp intelligence. "Do you live around here?" he asked hesitantly. "We live wherever we can," Doris replied simply, starting to pack up her merchandise. "It's getting late. We need to go." "Wait," Richard said, seized by an urgency he couldn't explain. "Let me help you. I can offer you a place to stay, at least, for a few days." "We don't need charity, Mr. Sterling," Doris replied with dignity. "It's not charity," he insisted. "It's just that bear means a lot to me. I'd like to understand how it ended up in that trash can, and you seem to need help." At that moment, Lily coughed hard, a dry sound that made Doris frown with concern. "She's getting worse," the woman murmured, more to herself. Richard felt his heart clench. Lily's cough reminded him of Cindy's in the early stages of her illness. "Please," he insisted, "I have an empty guest house on the vineyard property. You can stay there while you get back on your feet. No strings attached." Doris hesitated, looking at her granddaughter, who was now resting her head on her shoulder. clearly exhausted. The sun was still beating down mercilessly, and the temperature must have been well over 100 degrees. "Grandma, I'm tired," Lily murmured. Something in the girl's eyes seemed to break Doris's resistance. "All right," she finally agreed, "but only for a few days." On the way to the vineyard, Richard couldn't stop looking in the rearview mirror. Lily had fallen asleep in the back seat, still clinging to Teddy, while Doris kept her eyes fixed on the landscape passing by the window. What none of them knew at that moment was that Martha Jenkins, the housekeeper who had worked at Richard's mansion for 20 years, was watching their arrival with the two strangers through the kitchen window. Her face paled as she saw the teddy bear in the arms of the sleeping girl, and her hands began to tremble as she dialed a number on her cell phone. "Eileen, we need to talk," she whispered urgently. "Something has happened that could ruin everything." Meanwhile, in the vineyard's boardroom, Bob Thompson, Richard's partner, was signing documents that would secretly compromise the company's financial future. His satisfied smile as he put the papers in his briefcase revealed that big storms were brewing. The guest house was modest compared to the main mansion, but to Lily it seemed like a palace. The girl ran from one room to another, still clutching Teddy, her eyes shining with fascination at each discovery. Doris watched her granddaughter with a mixture of relief and apprehension, sitting in an armchair that was too soft for her bones, accustomed to the hardness of the streets. "Grandma, there's hot water in the shower!" Lily shouted from the bathroom, amazed. Martha entered carrying clean towels, her face a mask of courtesy that barely disguised her discomfort. Her eyes didn't leave the teddy bear, as if it were a bomb about to explode. "Dinner will be served at 7, she informed them dryly. "Mr. Sterling has asked you to join him at the main house." "We don't need to," Doris began, but was interrupted by another coughing fit from Lily. "The girl needs a doctor," Martha commented, her voice loaded with a hidden meaning that made Doris shudder. "It's just a cold," the grandmother replied defensively, but her eyes betrayed her worry. That night, while Lily slept soundly in her first real bed in months, Doris found Richard on the veranda of the main house. The businessman was sitting in a rocking chair, his eyes fixed on the vineyards that stretched as far as the eye could. "See? Why are you really helping us, Mr. Sterling?" Doris asked bluntly. Richard took a long time to answer, his fingers drumming on the untouched wineglass in front of him. "That bear, it should be buried." "What do you mean?" "When my sister, when she passed, we buried Teddy with her. It was her wish. How can it be here now?" Doris felt a chill run down her spine. "Maybe it's just a similar bear." "No," Richard shook his head. "It's the same one. It even has the blue ink stain inside the right ear, where Cindy spilled her favorite watercolor paint." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. In the distance, a dog barked at the crescent moon. "How long has your granddaughter been sick?" Richard asked suddenly. "She's not sick," Doris replied too quickly. "It's just a cold." "My sister also started with just a cold," he murmured, finally taking a sip of wine. The cough gradually worsened. Then came the joint pain, the weakness. "Stop!" Doris cut him off, standing up abruptly. "Lily doesn't have any of that. She just needs a good night's sleep and proper food." But her hands were shaking as she headed towards the door. The next morning, Bob Thompson arrived early at the vineyard, surprised to find Richard already in his office, poring over old family albums. "We need to discuss the new contracts," he announced, placing his briefcase on the table. "And I heard we have guests." "Bob," Richard barely looked up, "do you remember my sister?" The partner paled slightly. "Cindy? Of course we were kids. Together. Why? Were you at the funeral?" "Yes, but why are you talking about this now?" "Her bear has reappeared," Richard said simply, finally facing his childhood friend. "The one we buried with her." Bob slumped into a chair. "That's impossible." "That's what I thought. But it's here. in the hands of a girl who is the same age that Cindy was when... His voice trailed off. Richard, Bob leaned forward. You can't get carried away by coincidences. We have important matters to resolve. The vineyard is at a crucial moment. But Richard was no longer listening. His eyes had found something in the old album, a photo of his young mother in front of the university where she taught. And next, to her, smiling shyly at the camera, was a woman he would recognize anywhere. Doris, 25 years younger but unmistakably her. At the same instant, a scream echoed through the property. Richard ran to the window in time to see Lily lying near the garden, with Martha standing a few feet behind, her hands covering her mouth in a horror that seemed almost rehearsed. She just fainted, the housekeeper explained, as everyone gathered around the unconscious girl. She was playing and suddenly... Doris held her granddaughter in her arms, silent tears streaming down her wrinkled face. The teddy bear had fallen sideways on the grass, and something shiny was escaping through a small tear in its seam. Richard was the only one who noticed a tiny golden key. That afternoon, while Lily was being examined by the family doctor in the guest house room, Eileen, Richard's cousin, arrived unannounced. Her high heels echoed through the mansion hallways like gunshots. "Have you lost your mind?" she snapped as soon as she found her cousin in his office. "Picking up beggars? And right now?" "They're not beggars, Eileen," Richard replied coldly. "And what do you mean by right now? The investors are watching the vineyard, you know that. Any slip-up, any negative headline? What negative headline could come from helping a sick child?" "Sick?" Eileen laughed humorlessly. "That's what they're telling you. Richard, open your eyes. This is a scam. They probably researched your past. They know about Cindy." "How could they know about the bear?" he countered. "How could they know its name? And how do you explain this?" He threw the photo he had found in the album onto the table. Eileen picked it up with trembling fingers. "Where did you get this?" "The question is, why didn't you ever tell me that Doris worked with our mother at the university?" Before Eileen could answer, Martha rushed into the room. "Sir," her voice trembled, "something happened to the girl. The doctor, he said the symptoms are identical to the ones your sister had." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the crystal glass slipping from Richard's fingers, shattering on the floor into 1,000 pieces. The news about Lily's condition landed like a bomb in the Sterling mansion. While the girl rested under her grandmother's care, Richard locked himself in his office, the small golden key found in the bear spinning between his restless fingers. Something about that metallic object awakened long-buried memories, as if it were the missing piece in a puzzle he didn't even know he was putting together. "You need to eat," Martha insisted through the closed door, her voice filled with a concern that sounded strangely false. "It's been 2 days." "Leave the meals at the door," was Richard's dry response. The businessman had spent the last 48 hours immersed in old family documents, his hands trembling every time he found another photo of Doris next to his mother. The images dated back to the early 90s, when both were promising researchers at the university. In all of them, the two women smiled, surrounded by laboratory equipment and piles of notes. It was during one of these frantic searches that Richard found the first indication that something much bigger was at stake. Hidden among old correspondence, a yellowed envelope contained a warning letter from the university, mentioning serious accusations of intellectual theft against Doris. In the guest house, Lily spent most of her time sleeping, her restless sleep interrupted only by increasingly frequent coughing fits. Doris barely left her granddaughter's side, her eyes red from crying, revealing a deep fear that went beyond the normal concern of a grandmother. "You need to tell me the truth," Richard confronted her one night, after finally leaving his isolation. "Why were you in the photos with my mother? What really happened at the university?" Doris raised her tired eyes from the book she was reading. To the sleeping Lily. Some truths are too dangerous, Mr. Sterling. More dangerous than watching a child wither away in the same way my sister did, he countered, his voice choked with emotion. The silence that followed was interrupted by hurried footsteps. Martha appeared at the door, her face as pale as wax. "Sir, there's an urgent call from the bank. Something about irregularities in the vineyard's accounts." Richard ran to his office, only to discover that large sums had been transferred without his authorization. Bob, summoned in haste to an emergency meeting, presented documents that appeared to have Richard's signature authorizing the transfers. "This is forgery!" Richard exploded, throwing the papers on the table. "I never signed this." "Are you sure?" Bob replied calmly, a strange glint in his eyes. "You've been so distracted lately, so obsessed with your new guests." That same night, while the financial crisis unfolded, something even more disturbing happened. Richard finally recognized the small golden key. It belonged to his Aunt Josephine's old safe, kept in the mansion's attic for decades. With trembling hands, he climbed the dusty stairs that led to the long-closed room. The safe was exactly where he remembered it, hidden behind a faded tapestry. The key fit perfectly. Inside, besides antique jewelry and yellowed documents, there was a diary. On the first page, his aunt's elegant handwriting told a story that made his blood run cold. Cindy hadn't died of a rare disease. She had been gradually poisoned, her medication tampered with by someone inside the house. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Martha nervously prepared tea, her hands shaking so much that she almost dropped the cup. Through the window, she could see Eileen arriving at the mansion, her face contorted in an expression of barely contained fury. "He found the safe," Martha whispered as soon as the other woman entered. "What now? Now? Now we need to get rid of that old woman and the girl before everything comes to light," Eileen replied coldly. "And as for you, you better hope Richard doesn't find out your little secret from 25 years ago." In the guest house bedroom, Lily woke up startled, her little face bathed in sweat. "Grandma," she called in a weak voice, "I dreamed about a girl. She said the key will tell the truth." Doris hugged her granddaughter, silent tears streaming down her wrinkled face. In her mind, painful memories from 2 decades ago began to unfold. The laboratory where she worked with Richard's mother, the discovery they made together, the betrayal that destroyed her career and led her to misery. In the vineyard office, Bob frantically rummaged through drawers and files. He needed to find and destroy certain documents before Richard realized the extent of his financial manipulations. A noise made him freeze. Footsteps in the hallway. "Looking for something?" The voice of Danny Fingers Fury, the local conman Bob had hired to discredit Doris, sounded from the doorway. But there was something different in his tone, something that made Bob's blood run cold. "What are you doing here?" "Came to do the right thing, for the first time in my life," Danny replied, taking an envelope out of his pocket. "You know, I met Doris a long time ago. She didn't deserve what they did to her, and now I have proof of all your scams, Bob." At that exact moment, a piercing scream cut through the night. In the guest house, Lily had found something sewn into the lining of Teddy, a small digital storage device, so old that it seemed impossible for it to still work. The storm brewing over the Sterling vineyard was about to break with full force, dragging with it decades of buried secrets and lives destroyed by greed and envy. And in the middle of all this, a little girl and her patched teddy bear held in their hands the keys to the whole truth. Dawn arrived laden with tension at the Sterling property. Richard hadn't slept, his red eyes fixed on the pages of Aunt Josephine's diary, each revelation more disturbing than the last. The notes detailed not only her suspicions about Cindy's poisoning, but also mentioned a major conflict involving his mother and Doris at the university. "My sister discovered something," he murmured to himself, rereading a specific passage. "She saw someone tampering with the medication, But before she could tell, a sound of breaking glass interrupted his thoughts. In the kitchen, Martha had dropped an entire breakfast tray, her hands shaking uncontrollably as she tried to clean up the mess. "Are you all right, Martha?" Richard asked, observing his housekeeper's erratic behavior. "Yes, sir," she replied quickly, avoiding his gaze. "I just didn't sleep well." In the guest house, Doris examined the digital device found inside Teddy with wide eyes of recognition. It was a storage unit that she herself had hidden there decades ago, containing crucial evidence of her research. "How did this end up here?" she whispered, her wrinkled hands caressing the small object as if it were a precious treasure. Lily, paler with each passing day, watched her grandmother with eyes shining with fever. "Teddy wanted to come home, Grandma," she said simply, as if that explained everything. The girl had developed a peculiar wisdom since she became ill, as if she could see beyond the veil of ordinary reality. Her drawings, scattered around the room, showed scenes that she couldn't possibly know. The old laboratory where Doris worked, Cindy's face smiling, even the house where the Sterlings lived at the time of the tragedy. In the vineyard office, Bob faced his own nightmare. Danny had delivered copies of the compromising documents to Richard, revealing a complex money laundering scheme that had been going on for months. "Why are you doing this to me?" Bob asked desperately when they were alone. "I paid well for your—" "Silence! Some debts can't be paid with money," Danny replied, a glint of determination in his tired eyes. "Doris saved my life 20 years ago, when everyone turned their backs on me. Now it's my turn to do something right." The revelations followed one after the other like falling dominoes. Eileen arrived at the mansion distraught after discovering that her bank accounts had been frozen. Bob had used her name in several fraudulent transactions. "This is your fault," she shouted at Richard. "If you hadn't brought those two here, none of this would be happening." "No, Eileen," he replied with surprising calm. "This is happening because 25 years ago, people I considered family chose greed and power over truth and justice." At that moment, Lily had one of her worst fits. Her cries of pain echoed through the property, making everyone run to the guest house. The doctor was called urgently, but this time something was different. "The symptoms aren't exactly the same as your sister's," the doctor commented, frowning as he examined the girl. "There's something else here." Martha, who was watching from the door, let out a strange sob and ran away. Richard, suddenly alerted by a terrible suspicion, went after her. He found his housekeeper in her room, throwing clothes into a suitcase in a hurry. "I need to leave. A family emergency," she stammered as she saw him. "You knew," Richard said quietly, his voice laden with contained anger. "All this time, you knew what happened to Cindy." Martha collapsed on the bed, as if an invisible weight had hit her. "I didn't want to. It wasn't supposed to be her." The words came out between sobs. "Your mother treated me like garbage. Everyone treated me like garbage. I just wanted her to feel some of the pain I felt. So you poisoned an innocent child." Richard's voice trembled. "No, I just was altering the medication to make her a little sick, that's all. It wasn't supposed to be her." Martha covered her face with her hands, years of guilt finally overflowing. In Lily's room, Doris finally managed to access the files on the digital device on an old laptop. Her hands trembled as she read the documents she had hidden so long ago. "My God," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "So that's why." The files revealed that she and Richard's mother had discovered a revolutionary chemical compound in their research. But what should have been used for good was being secretly tested on vulnerable people by a group within the university itself. "Your mother found out," Doris explained later to Richard, while Lily finally slept more peacefully after receiving the correct medication. "She wanted to report it, but she was threatened, so So she decided to take the credit alone for the discovery, to take me away from the project. It was her way of protecting me, but I didn't know it at the time. I thought she had betrayed me. Danny, who had joined them, completed the story. Doris was my professor at the university. She discovered that I was being used as a guinea pig in the illegal tests and helped me escape. That's why they destroyed her career. The revelations continued to surface. The device contained not only evidence of Doris's innocence, but also documents linking Bob to the corrupt group at the university. He had continued his shady practices over the years, using the vineyard to launder money from illegal research. The most isolated vineyards, Danny explained, showing photos he had secretly taken, were used to grow species modified with the compound that your mother and Doris discovered. They never stopped the experiments, they just hid them better. Meanwhile, Eileen had disappeared, but her trail of destruction continued. Empty bank accounts, destroyed documents, and a desperate attempt to discredit Doris through a smear campaign in the local newspapers. She's always been like that, Martha revealed during one of her conversations with Richard, obsessed with power and money. When she found out that you would inherit everything if you didn't have children, well, let's just say that motivated her to make sure you stayed alone. The vineyard was on the verge of bankruptcy. Investors, frightened by the headlines about fraud and illegal experiments, withdrew their support one by one. Richard saw his fortune melt like snow in the sun, but strangely, that didn't bother him as much as it should. "Money is just money," he told Doris one night as they watched Lily sleep. "I spent years accumulating wealth, thinking that would fill the void Cindy left. What an idiot I was." It was during one of those nights of vigil that Lily had her most impressive vision. She woke up screaming, but not in pain. Her eyes shone with a supernatural certainty. "She's in the old laboratory," the girl exclaimed, sitting up in bed. "The bad woman. She's going to destroy everything." Richard and Doris exchanged glances, understanding immediately. The abandoned university laboratory where it all began still existed, locked and forgotten for decades. "Eileen must have gone after the original samples," Doris concluded, her face pale. "If she can prove that the compound was an exclusive discovery of your mother, she can claim everything," Richard completed. "The patent, the rights, everything left of the vineyard." But there was something else in Lily's drawings, something that no one had noticed before. In each of them, hidden in some corner, there was a small symbol, a golden key intertwined with a rose. "The Marins family crest," Martha whispered when they saw the symbol, her voice laden with shame. "My family. Before we lost everything to my father's bad investments." "What does that mean?" Richard pressed. "It means there's one more safe," she replied, tears streaming down her aged face. "In the old laboratory. My father, he was the head janitor at the university. He built secret safes for professors to store confidential research, including for your mother." The race against time began. While Lily fought the illness, her body reacting better and better to the new treatment developed hastily by the doctors, Richard and Doris prepared for a final confrontation with the ghosts of the past. "She won't get away with it this time," Doris declared, her voice filled with steely determination. "I won't allow another child to suffer because of that cursed research." The sun set over the Sterling vineyards, painting the sky blood red. In the main house, Martha wrote her full confession, each word a step towards redemption. At the hospital, Bob negotiated a plea bargain, his empire crumbling like a house of cards. And in the guest house room, Lily continued drawing. Her last drawing showed two women, one young and one old, in front of a large open safe. In the sky above them, a girl with wings watched the scene, smiling. "It's Cindy," Lily explained simply when Richard saw the drawing. "She said everything will be over tomorrow." That night, as a storm gathered over Bakersfield, three figures, made their way to the abandoned university campus. Richard, determined to uncover the whole truth, Doris, carrying with her decades of injustice and pain, and Eileen, hidden in the shadows, preparing for her last act of desperation. The storm, raging over Bakersfield, seemed to reflect the turbulence of that decisive night. As Richard and Doris walked through the dark corridors of the old university, each step echoed like a distant drum, marking the rhythm of a story that began 25 years before. "It was here," Doris whispered, stopping in front of a dust-covered door. "The laboratory where your mother and I made the discovery." The lock yielded easily to the key that Martha had given them. The smell of mold and old chemicals invaded their nostrils as soon as they entered. Beams of light from the storm illuminated the room through the dirty windows, revealing benches covered with white sheets and abandoned equipment. "Welcome to the origin of everything," a voice cut through the darkness. Eileen emerged from behind a bookcase, her hands holding an old folder. "I knew you'd come." "It's over, Eileen." Richard took a step forward. "Martha confessed everything. Bob is cooperating with the authorities. There's nowhere left to hide." "Hide?" She laughed, a joyless sound. "Dear cousin, I'm not hiding. I'm about to reclaim what is rightfully mine." "Rightfully yours," Doris interjected, her voice trembling with indignation. "You have no right to our research." "Your research?" Eileen sneered. "You shouldn't even be here. You were supposed to disappear after we destroyed your reputation. How dare you come back and threaten everything we've built? What you built was an empire of lies," Richard exploded, "based on the suffering of innocence, on my sister's life." A particularly loud thunderclap made the windows shake. In the guest house at the vineyard, Lily woke up startled, her wide eyes fixed on the storm outside. "Grandma," she murmured. Reaching for a pencil and paper, her hands began to draw frantically. In the laboratory, the confrontation continued. Eileen had moved closer to a large metal cabinet, her hands caressing the rusty surface. "Do you know what's inside here, Richard? The definitive proof that the discovery was exclusively your mother's. Her original diary, detailing every step of the research, not mentioning Doris at all." "That's impossible." Doris took a step forward. "We worked together on everything. Diana was smarter than you." Eileen cut her off. "She kept 2 diaries, an official one for the university and this, the real one." Richard watched the scene with a heavy heart. Diana, his mother, the woman he had idolized for years, now emerged as a much more complex figure. "Why, Eileen?" he asked softly. "Why continue with this lie after so long?" "Lie?" She laughed again, but her eyes were tearful. "You don't understand, do you? Everything I did was to protect the family's legacy, our reputation, our fortune. At the cost of Cindy's life? That was an accident." Eileen's voice faltered. "For the first time. Martha shouldn't have. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. And Lily?" Doris stepped forward, her eyes flashing. "Was it also an accident to poison her with the same compound?" Eileen's face paled. "How?" "The doctors identified the substance," Richard explained. "The same one that was used on Cindy. But this time, Eileen, you made a mistake." "What mistake?" "You weren't counting on the fact that Lily is special." Doris smiled for the first time. "She has a natural resistance to the compound, something we've never seen before." In the guest house, the girl continued drawing, her hands moving as if guided by an invisible force. On the paper, shapes began to come to life, the laboratory, the 3 figures, and a panel on the wall that no one had noticed yet. Back at the laboratory, Eileen retreated slowly towards the cabinet. "You can't prove anything without Diana's original notes." "We don't need them," Richard interrupted, taking a small object out of his pocket. "The storage device found in Teddy. We have something much better. Eileen's eyes widened in recognition. How? Your Aunt Josephine, Doris explained gently. She discovered the truth about Cindy, about everything. Diana entrusted her with all the evidence before passing away. Including, Richard continued, her confession about how you blackmailed her to keep Doris away, how you threatened to expose the embezzlement that our father was doing if she didn't cooperate. A lightning bolt illuminated the laboratory, revealing tears streaming down Eileen's face. She chose to protect that intruder instead of her own family. No, Eileen, Doris took another step forward. Diana chose to do the right thing, even if it was too late. At that moment, something extraordinary happened. A strong wind blew through a broken window, carrying sheets of paper with it. One of them, yellowed with time, landed at Richard's feet. It was a drawing made by Cindy, kept all these years in the false bottom of the cabinet that Eileen was trying to protect. In it, a girl held a teddy bear in front of a large rose garden, and in the lower corner, almost imperceptible, was the same symbol that Lily drew, the golden key intertwined with a rose. She knew, Richard whispered, his hands trembling. Cindy knew everything. The sound of sirens began to echo in the distance. Danny, following the plan, had alerted the authorities. It's over, Doris said softly, placing a hand on Eileen's shoulder, who was now crying openly. You don't have to carry this weight anymore. In the guest house, Lily completed her last drawing. In it, a young woman in a white coat hugged a grey-haired lady. In the background, a man smiled, holding the hand of a little girl. And in the sky, two winged figures, Cindy and Diana, watched the scene with serene smiles. 3 months later, the afternoon sun bathed the new vineyards of the small property that Richard had bought in the outskirts of Bakersfield. It was smaller than the old vineyard, but it carried something much more valuable: hope. Lily, completely recovered, ran. Among the vines, Teddy firmly hugged against her chest. Her crystal laughter echoed through the air, mingling with the sound of birds. She's the spitting image of Cindy at that age, Doris commented, sitting on the porch next to Richard. Yes, he smiled, watching the girl, and she has the same heart. The case had been closed without major scandals. Eileen accepted a deal, confessing everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. Martha, after testifying, began a long therapy process to deal with her guilt. Bob lost everything, but found an unexpected way to redeem himself. He now worked on a rehabilitation project for drug addicts. The original discovery of Diana and Doris, after decades hidden, would finally be used for good. Researchers were developing a revolutionary treatment from the compound, this time following all ethical protocols. You know what's most amazing? Doris commented, pouring lemonade. How everything connected. The bear, the drawings, the coincidences. They weren't coincidences, Richard replied softly. It was Cindy. She guided us here. As if to confirm his words, a gentle breeze blew through the garden, carrying rose petals with it. Lily stopped her running, lifting her face to the sky with a knowing smile. Grandma! Uncle Richard! Come see! She called, pointing to something in the middle of the vines. When they approached, they saw what had enchanted her, a small rose bush sprout growing spontaneously among the vines, and on its first flower, a perfect white rose opened to the sun. Richard felt tears in his eyes as he recognized it. It was exactly the same as the roses that Cindy loved to cultivate so much. Now we're all home, Lily declared simply, hugging Teddy. And for the first time in 25 years, Richard felt that she was absolutely right.